Hi, I'm Eric Light, and you're inside Chor Leoni. Hello and welcome to Inside Chor Leoni. My name's Eric Light. I'm the artistic director of Chor Leoni Men's Choir here in Vancouver, British Columbia, coming to you live, probably not live. No one's watching this right as I'm speaking this, but I am coming to you from St. Andrew's Wesley Church here in downtown Vancouver. This is our home for Chor Leoni and will be the place for a lot of upcoming concerts that we'll be talking about in this episode. Our Van Man Male Choral Summit is the thing that is on the verge of happening here. We have not been able to do it for 2 years because of COVID, and we are, at least I am, just chomping at the bit to get back to doing this festival. It's one of the, I think, the most mission-driven activities that we do as an organization. It brings together, of course, Chor Leoni to perform in 3 performances here in Vancouver, but it also brings together our Van Man Festival Singers, which is comprised of singers from all over the Lower Mainland, even some coming up from the United States, to be a part of a festival choir for that weekend, as well as our My Voice program and our Emerging Choral Artists program. And in this next video, you're going to hear from both of those folks from a couple years back as we sang in a program at the Chance Center with the vocal ensemble Cantus. Our My Voice program is one that we've had running for a number of years, and it involves usually 150 young singers from all over the Lower Mainland here around Vancouver. And it's a free program, and for a lot of these folks, it's their very first time ever singing in a choir. It's amazing, and certainly one this big that we put together for the Van Man. And those folks work for about 10 weeks together, and we form choirs, and then we culminate in this festival. This piece that we're going to sing for you is, I think, one of the Chor Leoni chestnuts. It's become a bit of a signature piece for the choir, and it was wonderful that we could be able to sing this with everyone involved. The composer and arranger Jonathan Quick, who is a Vancouver native, arranged this a number of years ago, and it's just become a hallmark for us. And I do want to say that as we were singing this with Cantus a couple years ago, the baritone soloist that you will hear at the opening and in the middle of the piece is none other than Sam Kreidenweiss. He is one of the Leonids. He'll be joining us to be a part of that ensemble, so it's a little sneak peek of his artistry as well. So this is from a few years ago, the wonderful arrangement of Loch Lomond by Jonathan Quick with the Van Man Festival Singers.
Where me and me true lover ever want again. they're definitely very cool. Seeing it, in some ways it felt like there were more people around me than in the audience, which I know isn't true, but it just, the companionship of being with these guys who I've rehearsed with for so many weeks, and then coming together with all the other guys from all around Vancouver. It's just this huge event. And it was amazing to be able to make music with so many people my age, while also being with Chor Leoni and these incredible singers. And yeah, the sound was absolutely stunning. I do remember being in my voice and always looking up at Chor Leoni and thinking, wow, I want to do that one day. And then I wasn't able to do my voice in my grade 12 year due to COVID, and then I wasn't able the next year, but so I'm finally here, and it's awesome, and I got to see the inner workings of what goes on behind the scenes in Chor Leoni, which it's easy when you're in my voice to just see the polished product and think, wow, they're such wizards, they just can do this. And then you get here and you realize how much work it actually takes. But it's so much fun, and everyone here is so great.
That was Jonathan Quick's arrangement of Loch Lomond. That TTBB version was originally made for Chor Leoni, and that was sung by our Van Man Festival singers a few years back with Sam Kreidenweiss as our baritone soloist. Sam will be singing with the Leonids when we get together in May here for the Leonids inaugural concert with the Van Man Festival singers, with Chor Leoni in my voice, and our Emerging Choral Artist program, which you'll hear from in a little bit. But before we get into any of that, I am so excited to be talking with one of the new tenors for the Leonids, somebody I'm just so excited to be working with. This is tenor Steven Soph. Hello, Steven.
Hello, how are you?
Fantastic. Tell the folks where you are today, what exotic locale you are speaking to us from.
Beautiful, lightly snow-dusted Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Ah, yes. I know it well. You flew into the Joe Foss Airfield in Sioux Falls. I have been there myself. So welcome back to the Midwest. Those are my old stomping grounds. And you're there singing. What are you there singing?
I'm singing the tenor arias in Bach's St. Matthew Passion with the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra.
Fantastic. Well, that is that's terrific. I hope you enjoy Sioux Falls. I know there used to be a really good Mexican restaurant downtown. After this, I'll have to look it up and try to tell you where it is and see if it made it through COVID.
Please do.
You and I have spoken when I approached you about being a part of this project with the Leonids, in terms of our outreach that we're going to be doing with our educational programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. First of all, who were the people, when you look back on your beginning singing, not even career, but just those beginning years of singing? Who are those folks that made a difference to you, and why? How did they help get you from, where you started to where you are right now?
Well, it starts with my family, actually. My father is a jazz drummer, and my mother was a French horn player. And my mom was in the New Haven Symphony. My father was playing session work in New York City and traveling with various groups. He was a drummer with the Woody Herman Big Band. And so I grew up with, of course, their influence, and they were both musicians. And if they didn't have to pay for a babysitter and I could come along and be quiet, then I would. So I was exposed to just a ton of music early on, and I got to meet Dizzy Gillespie backstage, and my father introduced me. He said, "Dizzy, this is my son Steven," and I just knew Dizzy as, this fellow with the kind, watery eyes from Sesame Street.
Yep.
And he said, "What's the magic word?" And I was like, "Oh!" And then I remembered "please," and then Dizzy Gillespie had taught me manners. So it's like music not only, it's just informed every aspect of my life from an early age. But through my mom's symphony friend group, this wonderful woman, Joanne Wick, who at the time was a bassoonist with the symphony, and has since retired from a choral director position at the Hopkins School in New Haven, which is, many things are old up there. It's an old school. At any rate, she heard me harmonizing to a speak and spell. Do you know what those are?
I do know what those are. Yes.
Yeah, so I was singing along with it and then harmonizing, and her boys had been Scott and Stephen Wick. They had been in the choir of men and boys at Trinity on the Green, New Haven.
Mm-hmm.
And that choir had a relatively new director. I think it was his second season, Walden Moore. And so she took me over to her piano, vocalized me up to a high C. I matched pitch. She just checked what she needed to check. And she said, I'm going to introduce you to Walden. My boys really liked working with him. And I was, I think, 6.
Wow.
And of course, I was
really
singing
young
with my friends all the time. Yeah. And so I joined the prep class to become one of the boy choristers. And I think when we started, there were 8 of us. And by the time the class ended, I was the only one. But I had a foundation of, the theory that I would need. It was probably similar to an RCM course, but Walden's version of it, I guess.
Right.
And, or is it RSCM? Sorry, I messed up.
Yes, I think it's RSCM.
Yes, thank you. Pardon me. At any rate, then my family moved to Texas, and Walden recommended me to Jack Noble White, who was the executive director of the Texas Boys Choir, which at that point had almost 300 boys in their program, and was with Columbia Artists and a private school. And I was on the road for months at a time with them and singing just nonstop. And it was now that I am a professional, I know looking back that experience and exposure through those boy choir or boy choirs, they were also of a professional caliber. At the time, I didn't know that. I just really
just seemed normal, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, they were just incredible people who ran. I mean, the patience. I now understand how patient they were with me too. Yeah.
Well, and you bring up so much that I want to talk about there. The existence of boy choirs, even that's how I came up through into singing. Was in a relatively large boy choir in a town of 75,000 people. We had 250 boys in our boy choir, which was sort of insane. But those are becoming fewer and far between right now. Do you think that without that we're having a lot of conversations right now about, single gender choirs, and should we be talking about them in terms of gender, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a take on that as far as maybe just from your own perspective of how you would have engaged into this? Like, had you been in a mixed choir or a children's choir, would that have been the same for you or not?
It's a great question, but it's a hard one for me to answer. I do know that Trinity on the Green in New Haven, where I started out, they now have a full male and female identifying treble choir, and maybe a separate girls choir. I would have to double check on that, but sure. I know that the program is thriving as much as it ever has, and that the musical quality is as high as it ever was. So, or if not higher. Walden is still there, and in fact, when I went back for my master's at Yale, I had the pleasure of walking up to him and saying, "It's all your fault." I'm still singing. And I know he's inspiring those boys and girls in the same way now. I would have to think about that a little bit as to whether or not it would change the experience. I feel just a ton of gratitude for the experience I had. I'm sure I would feel the same, with whoever I was singing with.
Right, and I'd agree. That would be sort of my take on it too. Right now, it's sort of complicated. On one end, we sort of understand of just making this a place where guys can sing and develop that sort of broad identification for themselves under the umbrella of singing. But at the same time, you don't want to be exclusive, and you don't want to be shutting anybody out from this experience. So it's a very I don't have the answers yet, at least certainly on my end. So I'm hearing what your perspective is when you get here in May, I'll ask you this again and see if you've thought anything more about it.
I have one more thought about it, if I may. And that was that the community in which the Texas Boys Choir was based, which is to say the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we also had exchange students from Adelaide, South Australia, and from outside of the state who stayed with host families. But that greater community of those cities, they call it the Metroplex, right? also supported the Texas Girls Choir. So there were, and they weren't officially a sister organization, but when the movie Problem Child came or was being filmed, or I guess the soundtrack was being put together, we, like, both of our groups were auditioning, to be in this infamous scene where there's a nun acting like a pendulum while a choir's singing, So if the organization doesn't necessarily, like, the community might too. I mean, it didn't necessarily feel
right.
Yeah. So and there was still chances for interaction too, even though I was in a boys' choir. It's like, oh wow, we got to hear the girls' choir sing, and then like talk to them and have lunch with them. So I don't know if that's germane to.
No, I think it is. I think it is, and it's just, we know why boy choirs existed. We can go back into the historical aspects of it, and when we sort of realize, oh, those reasons why we did this were invalid, like, they don't make that much sense. But then you take away some of the foundations for all of this. I think then it's just up to us to figure out, okay, so how do we make the new and better way to do this that brings everybody to the table, when tradition itself is not the thing that does it. Right. And I think that's what a lot of people are struggling with lots of aspects of life at the moment, to be perfectly honest. So yeah.
Sure.
So I want to ask. You are singing and doing high-level ensemble work, solo work, et cetera, et cetera. What sort of musical worlds are you living in right now?
In terms of repertoire?
Yeah, like, what are the sorts of things that your voice is being asked to do those formative years of your training, et cetera, et cetera? How are you able to branch out in that way? And maybe as a follow-up to that is, like, how is something like the repertoire that we're looking at with the Leonids fit into that or not fit into that?
Yeah. Well, in my ensemble work, there's just a breadth of repertoire, which I love. I mean, that's what's sort of wonderful. I focus, and I'm not trying to pigeonhole myself here, because you don't really want to necessarily, but I do find that I'm called as a soloist more often than not to sing works of Bach, Bach evangelists, or Handel, Haydn, that sort of grouping, if you will, and right. Mozart too, to a lesser degree. But those are definitely, like, sort of it's that warhorse type of rep, which is sort of funny to say about things that are considered early music now. But that just sort of speaks to the fact that we have programs now that are turning out people who specialize in that. And so then, the organizations are recognizing that and like, okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. But
yeah, it really is. So it's a real treat to be able to, quote unquote, specialize in that. The counterpoint to that specialization in my career is to sing in ensembles and to experience the variety of compositions, both old and new, taking on a variety of languages that I wouldn't necessarily be otherwise asked to sing. I find too that the social responses in repertoire, and there are some exceptions, but it seems like the ensemble things, or the ensembles in which I am active, they make a point of being on top of, like, okay, this is the music that's being produced right now, or they might even commission a response right. to something that's going on, and I appreciate that immediacy, and then to be able to turn around and then revisit, a John Evangelist, and maybe think about how it might pertain to what's going on now, but it's not the same as, say, like the Lamentationes, or it's whether it's an actual response. I would say, though, there's a great oratorio that Stacy Garrop wrote called Terra Nostra. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard the name, but I've not heard the work.
The work is great. It's basically a creation oratorio, but it doesn't stop with the creation of man, and it continues all the way through and pulls writings about man's stewardship of the earth, all the way through, what's going on with the environment and global warming, and incredible piece, and very much of our time. And so I was delighted to be a part of that anyway.
That's fantastic.
It can happen as a soloist too.
Right.
Yeah.
Being able to walk in those worlds of new music, early music, solo work, ensemble work, maybe especially between the old and the new music, do you find that different aspects of your voice, your artistry, expression are needed, required? Is there more freedom maybe in doing new music because you don't have that 400 years of history on top of you and everybody and the 1 million recordings of the best people that have ever done it ever, preceding you?
Yeah, certainly it can be. But because obviously there weren't recordings of the early stuff from its debut, it's still, even though, what sounds good, that, and what is that? Who's to say? But
Right.
That does win out in the end, it's, I do love the playfulness of both early and new music. I mean, I just did a gig with Folger Consort in DC, and we performed Schoenberg, and they were playing VLs, so,
Cool.
and the audience loved it.
Yeah.
That soundscape. I'm up there doing Sprechstimme with incredible early musicians on period instruments, and I had certainly never experienced that before the first rehearsal. And to see the audience's response and that it drew them in, and sometimes things don't work, but that really did work, which was
Right.
all the more exciting. So,
Right.
I think it's good to enter into these things with a sense of play and to figure out and to try, just even if it doesn't work in the rehearsal, try different techniques. Let's see. You might
Exactly.
rediscover something. Who knows?
Exactly.
Discover a new thing.
Well, and I'm sure now you've had a chance to, look at the Leonids repertoire. Is there anything there in particular that you're excited to sink your teeth into?
Oh, well, I'm a big fan of all things Estonian. I mean, that's
All things Estonian, yes.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's
So-
really, I'm excited about all of it. Talk about breadth in terms of programming. I mean, it's fantastic. And I was really marveling at the arc too. I think it's going to be, the performances are really going to be journeys for the performers and the audience.
I think so too, especially for the Sound Like This concert where it's going to be the Leonids and Chor Leoni. There's sort of two things happening at the same time, especially early in the show, that I wanted to make a set of music that's about, really talking about our relationship with the divine outside of any dogma or religious context. And like, if you're challenged with that, like what repertoire is there to do that? And I think it's quite extraordinary that for even limiting the repertoire to TTBB voices, how much breadth there is there and how much expression there is of those ideas. But then you add on top of it that it'll be 9 guys singing with the Leonids, then 67 guys of Chor Leoni, then all of them together in that mixing and matching of the colors, the textures, all the rest of that. That's the thing that I don't think we're going to really know what that all is in terms of the arc of the story that we're telling until the night of the first show, which I'm. That's of the many things that I'm excited about. It's that, and just seeing what this all sounds like together.
Yeah, it'll be thrilling. In that moment when it comes, that sense of arrival, it'll be palpable, and we'll all sense it. We'll just be like, aha, here we
And
are.
just as you said, we'll realize if it worked or if it didn't. So yeah,
Oh, no, I'm sure.
it's voices. It can't not work. It can't
It's
not work.
true.
I want to play, let the folks hear a bit of your artistry, and I found a video of you singing a bit of Bach Cantata 131. So first of all, could you maybe set this cantata up for us a little bit? We're going to play for the Meine Seele wartet section of that cantata, which features you and Cantus Firmus duet part singing together. But tell us a little bit about this piece and maybe how you got to sing it on this video.
Well, this is a funny one in that I was a last-minute replacement, and I had about almost 2 days to prepare for it. It's about a day and a half, and most of that spent on a train. In fact, the way they got me there, the only available train seat was a sleeper cabin, so I didn't bother anyone on the train, which was very nice. But this was at the Stanton, Music Festival, and at this point, I'm waiting for the Lord. It's before that arc of redemption that happens so often. I love this particular aria. It's so hard, and I honestly, I have not watched this video, so I don't know if it comes across.
You sound great. Yes.
Oh, thanks.
You may be in your music maybe more than I've seen you in other things, but now I know why. You sound great, but you're like there's an immediacy there, I guess to say.
Yeah, which is exciting. But the festival was great. The players, as I'm sure you'll hear, were fantastic. And part of this, one of the tricks I think of being able to do this is putting yourself in a position to say yes. And it was really fortunate that while I was sidelined, as we all were during the early days of the pandemic, one of the things that kept me sane and motivated and hopeful was to visit all of Bach's written tenor works or tenor lines. And so I had sung through this. And if I hadn't, then I still would have checked it, probably would have taken it, but I felt better knowing that, well, having sung literally through everything at that point, I was like, well, there was nothing that I ran into that I couldn't sing. So so just being in a position to say yes was very fortunate. But
that is amazing. And I think after all the no that the world has told us, the ability, the desire I think we all have to say yes to things is, like, at least for me, it's just almost overwhelming at this point. Anybody offers me anything, I'm there, even if I'm not necessarily prepared to do it. It's just so good to speak with you. I cannot wait to have you here in Vancouver, sharing your artistry, and just sharing your personage with all of the folks that we have as part of this festival that'll be here in our audience. So really, thank you, Steven, and we'll be seeing you really, really soon.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. I can't wait. It's going to be a fantastic experience, and I can't, just imagining all the different parts coming together has been so exciting, and to experience that is going to be fantastic.
I can't wait. It's been a long time in the making, so thank you so much. Please, this is Steven Soph singing Bach's Cantata 131, which is a setting of Psalm 130.
Meine Seele
That was Bach's Cantata 131, a setting of Psalm 130. Steven Soph, who is singing with the Leonids as tenor soloist there. Gorgeous work, amazing. He learned that in 2 days. Just incredible. It shows the incredible artistry that he has, and I was so glad he was able to share a bit of his perspectives with us on the show today. Earlier in the program, I was speaking about our Emerging Choral Artist program, and this is a really special educational endeavor that Chor Leoni does, and it is really trying to is designed to bring together some of the best tenor, baritone, and bass singers from our area, and give them a really intense and professional level experience. In the past, these groups have sung with Cantus, Chanticleer, Take 6, and this year they'll be with the Leonids. Last year, we were not able to collaborate with anyone, but we were able to modify the program and bring some of those top singers together here in the city. And we were able to record at St. James Church, a beautiful church in the downtown east side of Vancouver, this arrangement of a Swedish folk song called Limu Limu Lima. And it's a bit of a hymn to spring, and I feel like a really good time for us to be singing about that subject matter right now. And this is a gorgeously shot video that we did with those guys by our own Phil Jack, who produces this program. And so want to play for you now a little bit of what these young singers, kind of the future of singing here in BC, can be, with our emerging choral artists singing Limu Limu Lima. That was Limu Limu Lima, Swedish folk song arranged by Rasmus Kringström, who is notably the conductor of 08, an amazing choir out of Sweden. We've actually had him on the show a number of years ago, and it's just fun that we can share a little bit of their music here. I want to thank you so much for joining us this week, and we will have more guests coming soon and a little bit more talk about these upcoming concerts that we have, all a part of our Van Man Choral Summit, which is coming very, very soon. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.